Hello, EDSC 320 students. Welcome to Module 2 and our second virtual class. Let's jump right in. In this module, we will explore the different contexts of adolescence, including families, peers, schools, and work. As our past module, there are numerous assignments to be completed, and this time you will have 3 weeks to complete them with a due date of March 1st before midnight. Pace yourself so you are not scrambling at the end. You will be responsible for reading chapters 1 through 4 and completing 3 assignments. A discussion video where you'll engage in after watching this video on families dealing with difficult situations. A reflection after watching a video on a young girl with special needs. And finally, a reader's response after also watching a video of reflections of a high school student. We will also begin discussing your midterm coming up later in March and the bibliography, which is due in April. Hopefully, this is helpful for you to be thoughtful in your development of both the midterm and bibliography. For this presentation on this module, I wanted to look at the context of adolescence more closely with you. Of course, we know that parents are the first teachers. So what impact does parenting have on adolescence? I remember learning of this concept in grad school. It's not what happens to kids that creates trauma. It's what happens after. This is helpful in thinking about families not in terms of absolutes of good and bad, right or wrong, rather on a continuum of their own personal growth and development. With this idea in mind, let's look at some of the areas our textbook highlights. It makes sense to think of individuals having different temperaments. However, when we think of how this is applied to various situations, it can get challenging. One way we can look at these different temperaments is using a framework like this one called the drama triangle. This is one way to look at how people respond differently to the situations in their lives. When a person is confronted with a difficulty in their life, they can choose to respond in different ways. One way is through believing they are powerless over their situation and feeling that they are a victim. A victim in this triangle is powerless and feels that someone else is to blame for their situation or for their feeling miserable. When they blame someone, that person becomes the aggressor of their life, also known as the bad guy. Families can do this to one teenager whose temperament is strong and has strong opinions. Not liking this in the teen, the family can decide they are being aggressors for not agreeing with the family, and therefore the family feels victim to this quote-unquote bad guy. Another role a person could take on in a situation like this is the rescuer, known as the good guy. The good guy wants to keep the peace and will try and calm the victim from being upset. The rescuer has a temperament that most likely does not like conflict or is easygoing and doesn't want people to be upset. Unfortunately, these roles strip people of their power and leaves them feeling hopeless. By recognizing our emotions and taking care of ourselves, we pull back our power and remember we have the power to change and that our temperament can be an asset we work with rather than a detriment to be changed. The role of family members and their relationships with adolescents is something the book references as key in the development of emotionally strong adolescents. These relationships do not have to be with family members. They can also be with any healthy adult in the lives of adolescents. Of course, the type of parenting style used by parents at home impacts adolescents significantly as well. As the book explores these 4 parenting styles in detail, I just want to point out a few things. Of the 4 types, the most harmful found is the permissive, in that it can leave children vulnerable to inappropriate situations. Another important point to note is the textbook pointed out authoritarian parenting can have more harmful effects on white kids than ethnic minorities. Why might that be? The important point to remember in all of this is the value of healthy adult relationships with adolescents. The textbook also brings up the economic gap that exists among families, and again, in particular, along ethnic lines. We would be remiss to not take a deeper look at why this is so and the role of institutionalized racism. To help us dig deeper, I'd like you to take a look at these videos that discuss the use of the GI Bill and how this disproportionately helped white veterans, giving them an economic advantage, and not veterans of non-white backgrounds. There are more videos to explore in the notes section of this slide. The book then helps us see the impact of this type of racism on families as they are unable to provide for their families, as this economic hardship is created, and it spirals down into economic pressure, parental distress, which of course can impact familial relations, impacting children and adolescents. And if this happened disproportionately to families of color, we can begin to understand why today their numbers of health and well-being are low according to the current research. Finally, one last area I'd like you to explore is the role of parent involvement in schools. Many of us, when we think of parent involvement, we think of the PTA, and that is a good place to consider. However, the research of Joyce Epstein helps us understand that there are many ways families can become involved in their children's schooling, and volunteering through PTA is just one of them. Epstein created the 6 types of parent involvement to help us understand the many ways that families play a role in their children's learning experience. Click on the image and it will take you to a more thorough description of these types and of Epstein's work to help you better understand the role of families in learning. And with this, I will see you online this week and next. But don't worry, we will see much more of each other face to face starting the 25th.